Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first for our 2 games this week is 2011's Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, the globe-trotting journey towards the Rub al Khali Desert that solidified Naughty Dog as one of the gaming industry's major forces.
After that, it's a tough-as-nails platformer that tells a girl's story of grappling with anxiety and depression while climbing a mountain. 2018's Celeste.
So what, climbing for the theme this week?
I don't see what else it would be.
Nate does do a lot of climbing in Uncharted. He does far more shooting and all the ludonarrative dissonance there, but...
We don't know what Madeline does in her spare time.
That's true, but Madeline certainly does a whole lot of climbing. That is for sure. Joe, how are you doing this week?
I am very good, quite tired.
Yeah, it may be a tough one this week. Celeste is a challenging game to talk about for many. But, you know, we'll do our best, especially when we're framing it in the context of the soundtrack. And for me, to start things off, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Not one that I think many would expect us to talk about, others to talk about, when we're bringing up the Uncharted series on this show for the first time. But it means a lot to me, and I think it has the best soundtrack of the whole series. So I'm going to talk about it, and I'll try to convince you or something like that. But first, a little bit about Uncharted and what the game and the series is. And it all goes back to Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog is the developer behind the series, but they have quite the history as a developer, going back all the way to 1985 with the release of Math Jam on the Apple II computer.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty generic, but you know, that's where Naughty Dog, I guess, got their start. They hit mass popularity first, though, with the 1996 release of Crash Bandicoot on the PlayStation. The Crash Bandicoot series, the trilogy, Crash Team Racing, that whole bit, they really became well known for that. And after Crash Team Racing, Naughty Dog moved from the PlayStation to the PlayStation 2 with their series Jak and Daxter. And again, they had a trilogy of games with Jak and Daxter. They had a Jak and Daxter racing game on the PlayStation 2, but then it was time for the PlayStation 3. And instead of developing a Jak game for PS3, the team had larger aspirations, shall we say, and they had their codenamed project Big. Now, Naughty Dog, they wanted to, quote, develop such ideas as realistic human characters instead of stylized ones owed to limitations of previous hardware, as well as create something fresh and interesting, though it was termed as stylized realism. So basically, we're done with these cartoony characters of Crash, of Jak and Daxter. We want to try our take at human characters, human emotions, modern, mature stories. They really took inspiration for Big's narrative themes from different things like pulp magazines and movies, film series like Indiana Jones and National Treasure, these romanticized adventures with what-if scenarios. As far as gameplay, going into a new genre overall, they were looking at games like Tomb Raider, Gears of War, Resident Evil 4, and Kill Switch. And the results was the Uncharted series. Now, you could best describe Uncharted really as Indiana Jones if it were a video game, just in video game form. And in fact, at the time when Uncharted revealed itself, it was dubbed as Dude Raider, which was a term I had not heard in a very long time.
Yeah, same actually. Yeah, and then ironically, Tomb Raider became Girl-Charted.
That's a good point. You're absolutely right. Well, it was November 2007's Uncharted Drake's Fortune that was the series' first release on PlayStation 3. It was a hit for PS3's early days, which were difficult, shall we say.
To say the least.
but Uncharted Drake's Fortune had a Metacritic review average of 88. Amy Hennig took the principal writing credit for the game's narrative, and there was some assistance as well from Neil Druckmann and Josh Scher. And Uncharted made Nolan North a household name in the video game voice actor world with his leading role as Nathan Drake. Though interesting to note, the week before Uncharted Drake's Fortune released, that was the first release of Assassin's Creed. And Nolan North's performance as Desmond Miles in Assassin's Creed also turned heads. So a big time for Nolan North, and his career in video games only took off from there. Now, while Drake's Fortune really got the series rolling, it was 2009's Uncharted 2 Among Thieves that really propelled the series, and Naughty Dog as well, to just meteoric heights. Many considered Uncharted 2 to be 2009's Game of the Year, far and away, and some even consider it to be the best video game of all time, or at least in that conversation. I think it's great. I don't think it's up that high, but I mean, it's certainly fantastic. Uncharted 2 was really the first game that paired Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley together on the development team, and it really made the Uncharted franchise a PlayStation mainstay. It's one of the first signs, honestly, that PS3 really had to be taken seriously. So the real question going forward was, could Naughty Dog maintain this massive success going forward, or was Among Thieves just a fluke? And this brings us to Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Uncharted 3 released in North America on November 1st, 2011. Europe and Australia got the game on subsequent days. And yes, that was, for at least North America and how we say our dates, 11/1/11. Though, of course, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim had it famously beat with 11/11/11. But I do remember that at the time. That was something big when they were revealing the game and its release date and all that. If you want to play the game today, probably the best way would be through Uncharted: The Nathan Drake Collection, which is a remaster of the original trilogy of games, but on PlayStation 4. It kind of homogenizes the game's shooting and control mechanics, kind of using them from 3. And that was released in North America on October 7th, 2015. You can get that probably for $20 these days. All 3 games all together on PS4. It's really the best way to experience these games for the first time. Of course, Uncharted 3, developed by Naughty Dog, published by Sony Computer Entertainment. Uncharted at its core, it's a third-person adventure game with gameplay that includes third-person shooting, platforming, climbing, and light puzzle-solving elements.
See, theme builds itself.
It absolutely works. While the first game, Drake's Fortune, highlights the jungle environment, 2 Among Thieves kind of focuses on the snow. Sand is the big primary environmental feature for Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. The plot involves Nathan Drake, who is the self-proclaimed descendant of the famed explorer Sir Francis Drake, as well as his pal Victor Sullivan, or as he's known as Sully, or aka Victor Goddamn Sullivan. They're on a quest to find riches in the lost Arabian city of Ubar, which is also known as the Atlantis of the Sands or Iram of the Pillars. It's a legend that's made famous by British explorer T.E. Lawrence, or as you may know him, Lawrence of Arabia. Now, the quest to find the clues that will take him to the Rub' al Khali desert, they'll go all around the world, from London to Paris to Syria, but right on their heels is a secret British crime syndicate led by Catherine Marlowe and her creepy associate Talbot. So the real question is, what is the truth behind Ubar, and what mysteries lie in Nate's past? So Joe, here's where I ask you, what are our experiences with either the Uncharted series or in particular Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception?
So Uncharted 3 is the only one I know literally nothing about.
Oh, interesting.
So I watched an LP of 1 a long time ago. I have played 2, didn't like it. Sorry, everybody's going to be really mad at me for that.
I'm a little steamed right now, but okay.
I didn't enjoy it all that much. I did not play 3, and then I watched my roommate play 4, though I don't remember much about that because that was during a time in which most of that year is gone from brain. But 3 is the only one I have no experience with whatsoever.
Well, I hope this kind of fills in the gaps with 3 then a little bit, as it were. For me, yeah, it's a big deal. Uncharted and that series was really one of the first main series that I experienced on PlayStation 3. And with owning a PlayStation console in general, one of the first games I got for PS3 was the first 2 Uncharted games. And so I remember when in May 2011 I got my PS3, I remember then E3 came up and they showed Uncharted 3 and I'm like, yep, I'm excited now. I can't wait. And I remember really waiting for that game. So that's kind of my connection to it all. Some people have their thoughts on where the games rank and all that. When I went back to play the Uncharted series, 3 really held up very well, especially how I remembered it. So between 2 and 3, it's a big debate. I totally get why 2 was a really big deal at the time, won all those Game of the Year awards. But I feel like 3 improved on a lot of things. And yeah, like I said at the top, it has the best score in the series, in my opinion. So we'll get to that. But as far as the history of Uncharted 3, it was first revealed by Entertainment Weekly, of all places, on December 9th, 2010. A teaser trailer was then shown at the Spike Video Game Awards 2 days later. I definitely remember that one because that was, sort of these maps spread out on a table, and it was the aram of the pillars and all that stuff. I mean, that was great. I didn't know that there was a gameplay demo, though, shown at the Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show, on December 14th, 2010. It was the gameplay cross-section of the Burning Chateau scene. And I had no idea that they showed gameplay that soon after the teaser trailer at the Spike VGAs. Crazy. What I do remember, of course, was at E3 2011, and it's the famous cruise ship sequence that was shown for the first time. And, the sequence was especially mind-blowing at the time. I think it still certainly holds up today, but mind-blowing at the time because that was at a time where oh my gosh, water is looking so good in video games right now. And we were at that time in marveling at graphics. That was especially the case for Uncharted 3. Just, look at there. He's on the ship deck. He's looking out the ocean and, the water looks amazing. It's moving just right. Oh, wow.
Is this how I find out that you're the guy from Miiverse that would just comment on the water of every single game?
I'm not that guy, nor am I the one was, how does Samus crawl or how does Metroid crawl or whatever. Those, oh gosh, classic Miiverse times. But a lot of people also remember the technology really behind Uncharted 3 and how, again, it was a big deal for the time. When Nate's inside of the ship, there's realistic wave simulations happening on the ship. That the ship is kind of rocking back and forth in a realistic way, all simulated from the outside. Nate goes inside, it's not, just loading this new environment and forget everything on the outside. No, it's trying to maintain that realism. People lost their mind at the time, and it's still certainly impressive today for a game from 2011. And of course, Naughty Dog's motion capture, the actor performances, the writing, it only continued to impress, especially after the first 2 games in the Uncharted series, which were big accomplishments as well for their time. And as we'd see with Naughty Dog games going forward, this would only improve. They are one of the best in the business now at motion capture, at really getting believable performances from their actors. And we've talked about that with The Last of Us on this show. The Last of Us Part 2 sometime next year, hopefully. I mean, it's just getting better and better. Here's a tech fun fact, though. Uncharted 2 is apparently around 25 gigabytes as far as game disk size. Uncharted 3 was about 50. About double. Not only was the game just a bigger scale overall, but you may remember this was also during Sony's time of experimenting with 3D games. So Uncharted 3 had sequences like the Burning Chateau, where they wanted you to buy their Sony 3D monitor, which I did and I'm looking at right now. They wanted you to put on 3D glasses and experience the game. And Shadow of the Colossus, that Ico and Shadow of the Colossus remake in 2011. Oh, that had 3D support. Wow, impressive. That was kind of their big time there. But Naughty Dog's co-president, Christophe Balestra, posted a picture on Twitter during development at the time, showing that Uncharted 3 assets were consuming nearly 24.2 terabytes on a company network drive.
What? That's too many.
Holy cow. that's a lot. And that may be like with all, performance capture and all the cameras and video performances there, like it's just a ton. And to distill that all into 50 gigabytes, I mean, that's amazing.
Man, 1 terabyte is a lot.
Yeah. And we're talking more than 24. Just amazing. The game is infamous, though, in a way because of just how much it was marketed. And look back at the time. I mean, Sony was releasing a follow-up to one of its most successful critical and commercial PlayStation game successes and releases of all time. So yeah, they're going to market the crap out of a sequel. Of course, this resulted in a variety of treasure hunting promotions. Be the treasure hunter like Nathan Drake. But the campaign many people remember is the Subway Taste for Adventure. This involved players who purchased a 30-ounce drink and the cup from Subway. They could access the entire multiplayer suite of Uncharted 3.
Oh no, I do remember this.
Yes. The multiplayer mode in Uncharted 3 could be played in October, which is about a month before release, for people who bought large Subway drinks. So it was super weird to see commercials on television that had Nathan Drake, voiced by Nolan North, talking with the Subway big drink and go get your Subway sub sandwiches.
Hey, I'm Nathan Drake. If you're the adventurous type like me, then get in on the Subway Taste for Adventure for a chance to win epic trips and exclusive access to Uncharted 3. Get your code on 30-ounce drinks today. Subway, where winners eat. Ow.
And of course, then it also spoiled the desert airplane crash sequence and that set piece. Like, to put that in the commercial, that was kind of strange. So yeah, a lot of people remember that. Ultimately, when Uncharted 3 launched, it was received very well by critics. It has a Metacritic review average of 92, which notably fell short of Uncharted 2's 96. But Uncharted 3, as of March 2015, has sold over 6 million copies, so it was a big success for Sony at the time. As far as awards, it received nominations for Game of the Year, but 2011, great year for games. It was really tough.
2011 was a really big year. I still remember.
Yeah, it was really tough to compete in a year of Batman Arkham City, Portal 2, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I think it was much more common to see Uncharted 3 winning categories like Best PS3 Game or Best Graphics, Best Technology. It did win those 2 categories out of the 8 it was nominated for at the Spike Video Game Awards that year. We also had the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences give the game awards in animation, art direction, and visual engineering. The GDC Awards also gave Uncharted 3 Best Visual Arts. Now, when you compare the soundtrack for Uncharted 3, Uncharted 2's score won awards, but 3 missed out that year in 2011 to the likes of Bastion, Portal 2, Deus Ex Human Revolution, Batman Arkham City, to name a few. Again, great year for games in 2011. So ultimately, I think Uncharted 3 it's well received. It's a well received game, just not as much as 2. And like I said, I like it more than 2. I do understand there's a criticism out there of Uncharted 3 is kind of just written around these set pieces, and they really wanted just to do these big events and have the story move from place to place as a result of it. It also had interesting things happen, like there was a character of Charlie Cutter, played by Graham McTavish, and like he's like just written out like halfway through, and that's because Graham McTavish had to work on a film. I think it was actually Lord of the Rings related. He had to go work on a film, so they kind of had to write Cutter's character out of like the back half of the game. So weird things like that when you're under a time crunch, because here's the amazing thing. Uncharted, Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, as big as those games are, motion capture and everything, they're released 2 years apart from each other. 2007, 2009, 2011. That still blows my mind. It's just incredible work.
I didn't realize they were that close together, actually. For some reason, I thought there was a lot longer between 2 and 3. But also kind of makes me wonder how much crunch was going on in the background there.
It does make you wonder. Absolutely. Especially when, the story came out that Naughty Dog split into 2 teams because of their big success from 2. One team was working on Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. The other team was working on a little game called The Last of Us. As we mentioned on a previous episode, there's a newspaper in the bar in the opening chapter of Uncharted 3. And on the front page of that newspaper, it talks about a mysterious cordyceps fungus that has started to appear in the world. Of course, this is a tease for The Last of Us. Though again, as we mentioned at the time in that previous Last of Us episode, The Last of Us was supposed to be revealed by the time Uncharted 3 launched. And it wasn't. The reveal for The Last of Us was pushed to December 2011 Spike Video Game Awards. So during this time, for about a month, Naughty Dog's just like, oh crap, like this is in the game. Like this is talking about our next project. Will people notice? And no one did. Then after it was revealed, they got to say in December 2011 that yes, we did split into two teams to work on these big games. And if you think that Uncharted 3 and its success didn't solidify Naughty Dog's place in the industry, after that massive success called Uncharted 2, that if you think Uncharted 3 was just weak, The Last of Us. I mean, like, how do you have these three games just in subsequent fashion just be amazing powerhouses? And then, God, Uncharted 4 after that did really well too. Because, yeah, there were sequels for PlayStation 4. 2016's Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. 2017's side story of Uncharted, The Lost Legacy. With Chloe and Nadine from Nadine was a character in Uncharted 4. There were even, fan projects. Alan Unger, the director, released a 15-minute fan film in July 2018, which starred Nathan Fillion as Nathan Drake, which will become very interesting later when I kind of tie it all back in here. Just put a pin in that one. And of course, there is Hollywood's take on Uncharted. There is an Uncharted film that's been in the works in Hollywood for years. It's a running gag. It's an infamously, long developed film.
It and the BioShock movie. They're coming one day.
Metal Gear Solid movie. Jordan Voight Roberts. How is that? So Uncharted is supposedly having a movie come out. Aiming currently for a December 18th, 2020 release. We'll see if that changes. And currently, Tom Holland is planned to play the role as Nathan Drake.
He'd probably do a pretty all right job.
I think he will. He'll be a little younger, but I think he'll still do a very good job. So yeah, it's a notable video game series with the composer of Greg Edmonson. Greg Edmonson grew up in Dallas, Texas. He played the guitar as a kid, and when he went to school at University of North Texas at their College of Music, he studied jazz composition. So after school, he ended up moving to LA as a guitarist, and he got an opportunity to work at Hanna-Barbera. He worked as a protege under the TV composer Mike Post, who's known for Magnum P.I., Hill Street Blues, LA Law, Quantum Leap, lots of famous TV programs. Greg Edmonson has, certain favorite composers, including Jerry Goldsmith and Thomas Newman. But nowadays, he kind of mostly writes on piano for his scores, and sometimes with guitar. He has some interesting insight that I pulled a couple of quotes from different interviews, in particular, just kind of reinforcing what we've been saying over these different episodes of what it's like to compose for a game versus a TV show or a film. He says, quote, "A video game doesn't exist in its final form until very near the end of the project. If you're working on a TV show or film, the picture is shot and edited by the time you actually see it. So now your job is to put music into the scene and become a part of the support for the storytelling process. Video games are in a very early stage of development when you begin writing music. There may be rough graphics, but you need good guidance, and the game will be ever changing until the very end." I also liked his insight on when people say, well, what's your favorite song? What's your favorite track from this game? He said, quote, "I don't have favorite tracks as much as I just love it when a scene works and is exciting to the person playing the game. I find it that music is so highly personal to people that you just never quite know which piece will speak to them." And I feel like that's our show, in a nutshell, right? When we're talking about, presenting the game and talking about what we think are the 5 critical tracks, it's part of, us trying to share what we love about the soundtrack, so it's very personal in that sense, but it's also trying to bring in what worked in the game atmosphere and what you really need to know about, key moments in the game and how the soundtrack supports it that way. I just found that very interesting.
And the whole subjectivity thing that he brings up, that's why we have the cutting room floor. That's why both of us do the cutting room floor, not just one of us, because he's right. Everybody, music affects everybody differently. It speaks to each person differently. So yeah, that's a good quote.
Absolutely. So Greg Edmondson's discography, his only video game projects are those first 3 Uncharted games. Drake's Fortune, Among Thieves, Drake's Deception. It was Henry Jackman, who we'll eventually talk about on this show, who picked up the reins for 4. But yeah, those are his only video game projects. And what projects to be involved with as your only video games? I mean, that's certainly spectacular because Greg Edmondson is primarily a TV and movie composer. And his big TV project that many may know him from, Firefly. Yes, the infamously canceled Fox program written by Joss Whedon.
So that's what you meant.
Yeah. So, if you miss and love that show, I would highly recommend you check out the interview that he did on tracksounds.com. Just some great insight as far as his favorite scenes, how he wrote to certain scenes. I mean, if you're a fan, that'll speak to you. But he also mentioned in one of those interviews that Nathan Drake is very similar to Malcolm Reynolds in Firefly, and his relationships with the women in his life, that they're very similar to relationships that Joss Whedon crafted for Mal. So interesting that, everyone pictured Nathan Fillion as like, he would be a perfect Nathan Drake. Well, yeah, he was Mal Reynolds in Firefly, also composed by Greg Edmondson. Such a weird little connection there. Found that super interesting. As I mentioned, he's also a movie composer. I did not recognize many of the projects he'd worked on, though. Some of them included Skyrunners, which was the first Disney original film that aired on the channel Disney XD. There was Lucky Town with Kirsten Dunst in it, and also 2012's The Misadventures of the Dunderheads, which starred Olympia Dukakis, Haley Joel Osment, and Alison Brie. There's some interesting insight into the development behind the soundtrack for Uncharted 3. Really, we go back to Firefly here, though, because Firefly was actually what caught Naughty Dog's attention to Greg Edmondson's work. Like, they noticed the soundtrack, they loved it, they wanted to use that kind of sound for an E3 trailer for Uncharted Drake's Fortune, so they contacted Edmondson, and the rest, as they say, is history. The score for Uncharted 3 was recorded at Abbey Road Studios in London with about 80 musicians, and it was certainly a shift in direction from Uncharted 2's score. Uncharted 2 takes place primarily in Tibet, and so you have Tibetan temple horns and an erhu, which is an ancient Chinese violin, in that score. But because of the desert setting of most of Uncharted 3, there were instruments that were used that were indigenous to desert culture. Some of these instruments I have never heard of before in my life, but they are apparently called the zurna and the ney for primary woodwinds, the saz and the santur for stringed instruments. There's also the duduk, which is an Armenian woodwind that has a dark and haunting sound, as well as the bouzouki, a Greek stringed instrument. Edmondson said, quote, "You don't always have to be on the nose accurate with these instruments. You just want to add an exotic flavor to the music." And talking about just mixing up the sound and making something sound different for Uncharted 3, here we're going to get a little bit into music theory, but not too deep. He said in an interview that he used a variation of the Phrygian scale. The Phrygian scale, I'll try to put this simply, I guess. It's apparently the minor scale that appears when a major scale is started from the third note. So if you play, the C major scale on the piano, all of the white notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If you started that scale at an E, that would be the Phrygian scale. So I guess he had some sort of variation on this for the sound of Uncharted 3. And he said that it really just provided for a different melodic shape compared to the other Uncharted projects. Overall, just remarking on the production of game music as a whole, Edmondson said, quote, "Sony is responsible for the implementation of the music into the game, so it is important for me to make sure and cover all of the areas where they will need music. Sometimes you write to the picture, and sometimes you just use your imagination, but it is always important to capture the soul of the game." So what is the soul of Uncharted 3? Let's get into the 5 critical tracks And we'll start first with Nate's Theme 3.0.
I mean, obviously. This is the obvious one.
Gotta put this one here. The main theme of the Uncharted franchise, goes on the title screen. It's just one of those classic tunes in gaming, especially when you start thinking of like the PS3 era of game music. It's just one of the classics. Like, you gotta know this one. You gotta know Nate's theme. I think this version cuts through a little brighter compared to its past versions. If you go back and listen to certainly the original Nate's theme from the first Uncharted, and you listen to them this one in comparison, like it's just much clearer and brighter, as opposed to like the tones seem a little dulled. I don't know. It's just interesting to compare and listen to. But yes, of course, this one had to be here. It doesn't play much of a role in the game itself, but it's a tune and a melody that undeniably Uncharted makes you think of this franchise every time.
Yeah, it's the Uncharted song. Even if you've never played Uncharted, you've probably heard Nate's theme in some shape or form. I hear what you're saying about the muddied thing, but I think I prefer 2's rendition to this one slightly. I don't know what it is about the brass. I'm just... something about it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just different re-recordings, and they don't really use different instruments really per se. I think it's just different stabs or different takes at it. So it's all really the same song, but just, different stabs at it, I guess.
Still very good.
Number 2 on the critical tracks, Atlantis of the Sands. So sometimes we say, I'll go listen to this song, the full version, because it's so hard to pick just a clip of this. And I think this is really one of those examples. I do recommend listening to the full version, the full take here on Atlantis of the Sands, because it's really a kind of medley of a collection of themes throughout the game for this one in particular. Like, this is where you're really starting to hear this variety of Middle Eastern inspired instruments just on full display along with the traditional orchestra. And really, you're getting combat sounds. You're getting kind of the hero love theme with the da 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 da, the swelling, orchestral sound. That's a tune, a motif that will pick up throughout the game. That's really specific to this one in particular.
It is real cool to hear the international instruments, though. I think that goes back to like when we're talking about Kingdom Hearts 2. God, that was 28 episodes ago. That was over half a year ago, where we're talking about the Land of Dragons. Music and how it uses the Chinese instruments. It's kind of the same thing, and it's just these are instruments you don't hear in games like ever.
But you hear it and you totally think, yep, desert. And that's exactly what they want you to do. It's so well done. From there, we'll go on to the third critical track, Small Beginnings. And now, for something completely different. because this sounds like nothing compared to the rest of the Uncharted games, but it's critical, and it has to be mentioned because it's brought up at a really important part of the game. Throughout the first 2 Uncharted games, you're playing adult Nate. You're not jumping through time and seeing any of his history, but it's like the 3rd chapter of Uncharted 3 here, so pretty early on, you go back and play as Nate as a kid, as a young teen. And so you're in Colombia in this museum where he's discovering an heirloom, an artifact of Sir Francis Drake's. And it's this music that it's this guitar that, just goes and it's rocking back and forth. And it's one of these tracks where when you listen to it after the fact, it's like, oh yeah, absolutely. I remember exactly where that plays. It was so cool to hear because it fits Colombia, but it fits like a totally different time period. It's just a much more naive and less experienced Nate. And it's, of course, then it's where he meets Sully for the first time. So like there's the tie-in there, but just so memorable in game. And it was a track that was particularly mentioned by Edmonson in an interview where he said, quote, "It's different from anything I think we've done before. That piece has a lot of nylon string guitar. I think that the action cues were by far the best that we have ever done. For the first time, we actually designed some cues to match certain levels of the game." And it just goes back to it. Like, this was designed specifically for this, and it really emphasizes the moment because you're sneaking around this museum. You're a kid. You're not supposed to be there, but it's kind of like the formation of your thief years. It's super cool. And of course, I got to tie it back to Gustavo Santaolalla. Just big vibes there with this guitar playing. It really makes you think, and looking forward to The Last of Us then.
Yeah, I can absolutely hear in the guitar specifically. Yeah, no, you're right. It sounds very Last of Us.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the instrumentation, no, but the guitar, absolutely.
But yeah, it's small, it's contained. It doesn't sound like anything else from Uncharted. And that's why it had to be here. Number 4 on the critical tracks, The London Underground. I mean, just a super cool moment, still early in the game. Might be like chapter 5, something like that. But Nate and his crew, I mean, there's Sully, there's Chloe, there's Cutter. They're about to storm Marlowe's compound for clues that are going to be essential to their journey towards the desert and Ubar. This sound has really this like James Bond kind of thriller, kind of just sound to it. Because you're going into the criminal underbelly of London, and you're trying to break in this secret compound. They're a secret organization, and you're trying to steal from them, essentially. So it's really cool heist mission kind of music, and I love it. You just hear all these various stringed instruments that they're kind of tinkering around with. It's dark, it's gritty, and it really matches what's going on in the game. And again, like, in the clip with where the string comes in, the da 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 da, it's another motif, it's another riff, it's another cue that you hear it and just like, yes, absolutely, I remember this part in the game. It's so good, such a standout.
You mentioned James Bond, and at first I'm like, I don't know, I don't think I hear it, and then the ding ding ding, starts up. It's like, oh yeah, no, that's the most James Bond thing I've ever heard in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there it is.
Right there. Absolutely. But all of these themes so far, like, they're different in a way, but like, yeah, they're certainly Uncharted, but we're not talking yet about any combat music. When you're in a gunfight and you're, running and shooting for your life, because that's kind of a big deal in Uncharted with its third-person gameplay combat. But now we get to number 5, and we're talking about Boarding Party. The ship is sinking. You're on that cruise ship. It's grenade's gone off, and there is a leak in the ship. So you better get off before you drown. It just adds to that, great sequence overall. And I couldn't include it in the clip because it's another one where it's a long track and we only have 30 seconds. The beginning of this song that's not in the clip is just so cool. Like these grungy electric guitars and piano that comes in. It's this creepy yet beautiful vibe to it. But it's actually a callback to the original Uncharted, Uncharted Drake's Fortune with the bunker chapter. And so it's really a callback to that theme, that leitmotif. But then when it kicks in and you've got a battle going on and you have those electric guitars, and Edmonson even points it out. He says, quote, "Somali-like pirates seize commercial ships, and after looting them, they just abandon them to rust and rot in this ocean cemetery. We were looking for a sound that matched this rusty, grungy place and decided that really distorted electric guitars seemed to do the job best." Yeah. Yeah, they sure did. When you pair that with the high energy of the string hit, the bump, 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 it's like, this is Uncharted. This is what gunfight music sounds like in Uncharted. And it goes with that amazing sequence on the cruise ship when, get the heck out, it's sinking.
I don't think I've even seen that sequence, which is weird. If it was shown and like, if it was the big famous first shown thing.
E3 was the ship, so yeah.
See, I'm losing my mind this quickly.
It's E3 2011. It's been a long time. It's okay.
But I've never seen this sequence, so maybe I ought to look it up. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is the perfect distillation, though, of like, this is Uncharted music, like, the battles and all that, but just has some of 3's instrument quirks here and there. On the cutting room floor, you don't have any because you haven't played the game.
I know nothing about this game.
But I have a couple here for you, and I'll recommend Cruisin' for a Bruisin'. Which, let's be honest, it's just a cool name for a song. It's also the name of a chapter in the game. And it's when you're on the ship before it sinks. So you're kind of getting that same vibe and, more combat here. Just a different sound, but this is like a melody that's pretty memorable. Out of all the battle music that you'll hear, this one stands out pretty well. And I even definitely get some Metal Gear Solid vibes with some of these brass hits, the bow, 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 just kind of hitting in there. So I really get that feeling a whole lot from this one. The other one, I will recommend Badlands. So this track as a whole, I think, is just okay, but it's this clip, and when the melody comes in, I just get goosebumps every time. It's such a cool melody, it's such a cool sound, and then it's gone. But it's so memorable from the game, and I think it's because it's when Nate ends up fighting fire djinns. See, Uncharted games take these weird supernatural twists that more often than not actually make the game worse because they just get so unrealistic. And these games, if you're looking to play them for the first time, like, play them on easy, because Uncharted games are infamous for bullet sponging enemies, like infamously so. And these fire djinns are, God, they're no exception. They're awful, awful, awful. But yeah, I really love this section. Definitely reminds me back to where they could have committed to a really big story moment, and they didn't, because these are pulp adventures, and everything's okay at the end of them. So what will I never forget about Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception? It's like I mentioned. I mean, when I got that PS3, this game was one that I was looking forward to the most as my next game purchase in the fall for PlayStation 3, because I loved the first 2 Uncharted games, and I love this one specifically because of the timing. 11/1/2011. Like, I actually really remember, like, I'm here at Youmacon 2011, but I can't wait to be at home to play Uncharted. It's sitting there waiting for me.
That was the first year I went, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
So it's a good time, good memories as a whole. But Uncharted's always been the most special PlayStation franchise for me. And so, while I think I like Uncharted 4 as a game experience the most in the series, these songs, man, I think 3 has the best score.
I'll always remember that I played Uncharted 2 once. Back in like 2014.
And that is a game. Give the Nathan Drake collection a try if you're out there and you're curious. But again, they do have really difficult settings for difficulty, but don't feel ashamed for cranking that on down. Just word of advice.
I actually think the thing I remember the most out of this game is the fact that it has the coolest stage in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, because they fuse it with, it's the plane crash, but then they fuse it passes by Columbia from BioShock Infinite.
That's right,
and
yes.
While for the most part, I think the combination stages are dumb, Metal Gear Rising is mixed with Loco Roco, that one is legitimately super cool.
Very cool idea. Yes, absolutely. So to transition to our next game, we'd like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remake, whether it's on OC Remix on YouTube, what have you. For the Uncharted series, I found one from Srad Almanara, who did a kind of metal cover of Nate's theme. So I think you'll enjoy it. Check it out. We'll be right back.
Let us begin.
Oh no.
We are here to talk about Celeste. This is my turn, and that's how the show went. You've been listening for like 29 episodes.
That felt like a reach as you were climbing for the transition.
See? The theme just builds itself.
It's okay. We're about to get real sad. Don't worry.
Celeste is an indie game that was originally released on January 25th, 2018 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC. So everything, except for mobile. I don't think it's even come out on mobile yet, which is actually kind of surprising, to be honest.
But given the difficult nature of the game and the controls, I'm not too surprised. Like, until we get like the Apple, streaming or whatever, when game controller support is fully implemented instead of just, touch the screen for the controller. I wouldn't be surprised if once that happens, we'll see Celeste on mobile. But yeah, not yet.
I think it's possible. I mean, Journey just came out on mobile and took me for a loop, so what do I know?
But look at I know, that was amazing, certainly. But look at the gameplay of Journey compared to the gameplay loop of Celeste. I mean, come on.
No, you're correct. You're right. Playing Celeste on a touchscreen would be a nightmare. So, it was made by developer Matt Makes Games, which, despite the name, is not just a guy named Matt in his room. It is actually a small studio made up of Matt Thorson, Noel Berry, I think it's Noel Berry, Amora Bettany, Pedro Maderos, and Gabi D'Arienzo. Some of those people live in Brazil, and I believe actually technically work for a studio called Midboss in Brazil. But they were on the development of this game as artists, pretty much. In Celeste, you take control of Madeline. She's a young girl who has decided that she wants to climb to the summit of Mount Celeste, which is a fictional mountain, I'm pretty sure. It's a fictional mountain. A mountain that appears to have some supernatural qualities to it. She wants to reach the top, not because she's a mountain climber, she is strictly not, but just to prove that she can. Because she suffers from things like anxiety and depression. She has panic attacks, and she does not have a huge amount of self-esteem. And she wants to prove to herself that this is something she can do. She can climb that mountain. And on her way up, she meets an interesting cast of characters like Theo, the old lady, who I'm pretty sure does not have a name, Mr. Oshiro, and also ends up releasing the personification of her anxiety and depression in the form of a dark Madeline, who in-game is referred to as part of you, but both internally and the fan base, they refer to her as Badeline.
And that's great.
I love that name. She escapes from a dark mirror that is in the center of the mountain and proceeds to try and stop Madeline from climbing the mountain because, again, Madeline's not a mountain climber, and Badeline represents the voice in the back of her head that says, you can't do this, stop trying. So, I will warn everybody, near the end, this is going to get kind of heavy, just a tad, because I don't want to talk about this game and not get into the heavy aspects of it. Also, I'm not really going to spoil much, because this game came out a year ago, a little over a year ago now. Well, almost 2 years actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Came out in January of 2018. Almost 2 years ago, but also go play Celeste.
I mean, yeah, I'll be blunt though. I mean, there isn't much to spoil. It's a very fulfilling journey, but I mean, you basically covered it all. You're trying to climb a mountain to overcome your anxiety and depression. What, are you not going to do it? Are you not going to climb the mountain? I mean, if you stop playing the game, sure you won't, but like that's the journey, and it all parallels so nicely.
Celeste itself is a precision platformer, where the player must use jumps, as one would expect from a platformer, and air dashes to avoid obstacles and progress through chapters room by room. It is very important that you say the room by room part, because it's a thematic cornerstone to the game, I think. I really don't know what else to say about the gameplay. It's a good game. It plays super well. What are our experiences with Celeste? Tell me yours.
I am incredibly bad at 2D platformers. They are not games that I grew up with, but over time, I've got a little more practice. But Celeste was a game that I found daunting. Just what a lot of people say that it's a pixel precise platform that you got to be really good. And yeah, I'm sure for the extra difficult things, the extra collectibles they throw at you, you absolutely have to love platformers and be very good at them. But for a fundamental game to experience the whole narrative for yourself, if I can do it and I beat it, you can do it, and you should experience Celeste. I played it about a year ago, almost to the day last year, and I loved it. It was certainly one of the best games of 2018.
That's actually one of the central themes of Celeste, I feel like, is that even if you are bad at this kind of game, it's very supportive of that. And we'll get into where that philosophy came from, but it's a game that, instead of picturing games like Meat Boy or something like that, where it's like, haha, screw you, you're bad at the game, you're dead now. Celeste has this sort of feeling where it's like, it's all right, try again, you'll get it, you can do it. And there's nothing wrong with games being that first one. It's just kind of refreshing when a game like Celeste comes in as the other one. So, development of Celeste actually started as a prototype that was made for a game jam, which that is 2 in a row for me that were indie games that started as game jam prototypes. Probably more than that. I'm pretty sure Valhalla was one of those too. And it was made in 4 hours. It contains 30 rooms and was designed to play on the Pico 8, which is very unclear what the Pico 8 actually is. It is a virtual machine / design tool / fictional but not fictional game console that actually exists that you can play and people can make games for, but it's not real, and I don't know. I tried.
I've always heard, the prototype just explain it like, oh, it's a flash demo.
It's basically a flash demo. And the original prototype is actually available in the game. In the final version of Celeste, you can find it in the hotel by accessing a computer during Chapter 3. And once you have accessed it for the first time, then you can just access it through the title screen.
I'm pretty sure I missed that one. Whoops.
I did too. A friend had to show me where it was. After releasing this prototype, it kind of became really popular with speedrunners.
Oh, sure.
And so the guys at Matt Makes Games were like, we might have something here. And they decided to expand it and improve it and build it into a full game. The final game contains 200 rooms spread out among 8 chapters, with a 9th DLC chapter set to release later this year, was announced like last week. And there are also like little bonus areas that you can do that are way harder than the original game. There are B-sides, which are pretty hard. I've only beaten one, and it took me like 45 minutes. And C-sides, which are absurdly hard, and I've never even played one of them.
Yeah, it's like I was saying, like, no thanks. For those that love it, I'm sure they are up to the challenge fully.
Yeah, I believe you unlock those. You unlock the C-sides with strawberries, don't you? Or is that Chapter 9 or 8? I don't remember.
I don't know.
I don't think strawberries actually unlock anything. There's even like a prompt in the game that says collecting strawberries will impress your friends, but they don't really do anything else, so don't worry about them. So, according to Matt Thorson, his inspiration for making the story of Celeste a modern slice of life tale, those are his words describing, which I guess, yeah, that works, was the Studio Ghibli film Whisper of the Heart. Hey, yo. Whisper of the Heart's my favorite Ghibli film. I love that movie. If you've never seen it, it is fantastic. I don't really see where it came into this, but hey, sure.
You're like, thanks for the shout out.
Whisper of the Heart it has kind of similar themes of like proving to yourself that you can do something. Instead of climbing a mountain, and Whisper of the Heart, it is writing a novel. But if you've never seen it, absolutely fantastic film. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's my favorite movie that's ever come out of Studio Ghibli. It's not even a Miyazaki film. So shout outs to that. From there, the story evolved, being largely based on personal experiences with anxiety and depression, which that's really the best direction you could come at with that kind of story. The only people that can really successfully tell the story of anxiety and depression are those who have experienced it themselves. Because otherwise, very likely, you just won't get it. You could try, but it's really hard to explain. Well, you can name Madeline anything you want, did you just name her Madeline, or did you have a name for her?
I feel like she was referred to Madeline in game, but I probably did Yoko on my save file. I don't know if there's a difference there.
I did Yukiko.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They do refer to her as the name you put in game.
Oh, okay. So then I did do Madeline then, because I do remember that name being used prominently.
Okay. Because she is not supposed to be a blank slate, as you would assume when you name a character. She is actually supposed to be a fully fleshed out character. And people have asked, like, is she designed to be kind of androgynous because she is meant to be a blank slate that anybody can project onto? To which Matt Thorson said, no, that's just how she looks. She is a fully fleshed out character. Celeste is known to be a hard game. It is based on older Super Nintendo platformers. But Thorson also believes, like I said earlier, that it is more compassionate to players than your average retro-style indie game. Quote, it's a hard game, but it wants you to win, and it's on your side. And again, that makes perfect sense, and I think that's a big reason why so many people, even people who aren't super great at 2D platformers, are able to get through it, because it's less dejecting when you fail in Celeste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quick turnarounds, quick spawns. Like the loop is real quick and it makes it, not that depressing, but yeah, just try again. It's okay. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, play Celeste. You'll enjoy it.
The game also features an assist mode that allows players to lower the difficulty by making the game move slower, turning on infinite air dashes, becoming invincible, and more. I didn't use it, but in fact, I don't actually think I knew it was in before I started researching for this game.
Same. That would have made it a lot easier.
Apparently, Thorson was against this idea when it was first brought up, but then the rest of the team eventually led him to realize that no, this is probably an overall good thing to put in. Make it so that anybody can play this game if they want. And could those ways be seen as cheating? Yeah, sure, whatever, I guess. But like the theme of Celeste is that failure is okay. Keep trying. Eventually, you'll get it. And if you need help on the way there, that's fine. And this was just a way of them reaching out a helpful hand to some of the people playing the game that were less than capable of doing it without that help. It's an accessibility option, if anything.
And it's an option, and that's why it's okay.
And I think it works towards Celeste's central message perfectly. If you want to be a jerk and look down on people that used it to be Celeste, whatever. That's your business.
Mm-hmm.
So, Celeste was received fantastically upon its release. It won several awards, including Games for Impact and Best Independent Game at the Game Awards, Action Game of the Year and Outstanding Achievement for an Independent Game at the DICE Awards, and Best Audio at the Game Developers' Choice Awards. And there were more than that, and it was also nominated for tons of awards, even if it didn't win them.
Can we just talk about their acceptance speech for Best Independent Game at the Game Awards? I mean, what a moment to basically at the end, saying that, if you beat Celeste, like you did that, like that was part of your power and you're capable of so much more. I mean, wow. One of the best moments of the night.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm glad that I was watching it when that happened, because about 5 minutes later, I had to go pick up Matt from the airport. And then I missed Joker being announced for Smash.
And that was one of the best video game reveals of my life.
Thanks, Matt. By the end of 2018, it had reportedly sold over 500,000 copies. And its highest Metacritic score is a 94. I believe that is for the Xbox One version, surprisingly enough. Is the highest rated version of Celeste, but I believe the lowest is 88 for the PC version. So it was rated very highly. But when people talk about Celeste, they don't usually talk about how well it sold or the awards it won. Usually, people talk about the impact it had on them personally. The composer, Lena Raine, who we will get to in just a minute, says that a player contacted her about how the game had helped them get over suicidal thoughts. Quote, one of them mentioned that they are suicidal, but I chose to live as a result of the encouragement given by the game. I legitimately don't think I've ever felt as much validation that what I'm doing with my life can help people. Because this game does deal with really heavy themes that a lot of people can relate to. One story that I found that I really actually liked was Thorson has a favorite reaction to Celeste in this way, which was about how somebody had posted on Reddit about how the game had lost them. Originally, they had really related to Madeline with her beating herself up about the problems that came with her anxiety and talking about how she had to beat it. But then the ending happens. At the end of Celeste in the final level, you accept Madeline as a part of who you are. And Madeline and Madeline work together to climb the mountain. It's not an idea of like, I beat Madeline, take that. It's you and me are the same person, and we might not agree with how we're supposed to live our life, but we're still sharing the same brain. We have to work together on that. And he thought, this Reddit poster thought that this is wrong. That's not how it works. And then apparently a week later, he returned to Reddit with a different point of view, saying, "The idea of accepting Battlein left me dumbfounded. You're supposed to beat depression and anxiety, not accept it. But after last week, I realized that I clearly haven't beaten my anxiety, if not my depression. Celeste and the helpful users from last week's post gave me the perspective and push to try self-acceptance. And you know what? It's not bullshit." I don't like to curse on this show pretty much ever, because I like this being a show that anybody could listen to, but I feel like that wording is very important, is that it's not bullshit.
Because, I mean, like, that's what your brain can tell you sometimes, just, to get down on yourself. But, like, yeah, like, it's absolutely worth it. And if you're hearing this, like, self-acceptance, you and me are the same person, you think Persona 4, congratulations, you're me.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's part of that game's narrative. But for Celeste, it's the gameplay, and it's written so well. I mean, people give Persona 4 credit for its writing, but this, even more so, just for the acknowledgement of these struggles. And it's just so well done with gameplay and narrative and everything. It's just coming together for the full experience.
And Celeste apparently also led Thorson and company to realize that they were not treating themselves as well as they should be, specifically through participating in industry norms like crunch. For people that do not know, this is the second time crunch has been mentioned on this episode. Crunch is basically when, the game's got to get done. We're behind. All right. We're going to work ourselves to death until it's done. 80 to 100 hour work weeks. Let's do it for months. And it's a big problem in the games industry right now. We've talked about it before with Stardew Valley and how that was he put himself through that. And that's a bit more of a gray area because they obviously want to. Well, who am I to say that they're making their wrong decision for themselves? But most of the time, it is not up to the individual. Thorson claims that because of the lessons learned from Celeste, not the lessons making the game, but the lessons looking at the narrative of the game, the next game they make will be different in that respect. And so let's bring it up just a little bit and talk about the composer, Lena Raine. I almost gave up on looking for more information about Miss Raine because, again, this is another female composer. This is our third, fourth?
Something like that, yeah.
We haven't had very many, which is a shame. But I almost gave up looking for more information about her because at first I could just find her birth date and some general information about her. I'm glad I didn't, and we'll get into why in a second. Lena Raine was born on February 29th, 1984. She is based out of Seattle, Washington. And while I can't find a lot about her early life, she has been working in the games industry for 12 years. The little I could find about her early life is that she grew up being in choirs and also learned sight reading and music theory at a very young age. So music has always sort of been a big part of her life. She attended a 4-year college for music. Didn't mention which one. Not really important, but still. And then right after graduation, she had her sights set on doing music for video games, specifically video games. That was her goal, which for a lot of the longtime industry veterans that we've talked about, it's usually like, well, I wanted to do TV or I wanted to write for anything. I was good to write for anything. And then they ended up in video games and that worked out for them. But no, Raine was like, video games, let's do this. But that apparently didn't work out for a really long time. As she puts it, quote, lots of big companies aren't interested in giving the time of day to someone right out of college, which sounds about right.
For the US, certainly. Yeah. It sounds like we've had a lot of those experiences for Japanese composers, and especially older ones, maybe back in a different time period. But today in the United States, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So she apparently wrote music in her free time as a hobby while working day jobs as a certification tester at places like Nintendo and Warner Brothers. And eventually, she noticed that ArenaNet, the developers of MMORPG Guild Wars 2, were hiring for a design position. So she figured, I can do that. Applied for the job and got hired. This is where one of the best stories I think I've heard so far on this entire show starts. After a while, for reasons that she doesn't even seem to completely understand, they gave her free reign on some of the post-release content. Now, for people that don't play a lot of MMOs or don't know how those work, those are kind of what we call a games as a service almost, though they existed before that term existed, which is the MMO comes out, but then they are continually adding to it over and over and over and over, sometimes with expansions, sometimes it's just small events, that kind of thing. It's a living world, basically.
Yeah, you got to keep that player base, especially if they're subscribing and paying every month. And yeah, you got to feed the beast.
Which, granted, I don't think Guild Wars is one of those. I don't believe it has a subscription model. I think it is you buy it once and then you can play forever.
I think you're right. But yeah, to keep players actively invested, like the concept still stands.
So she ended up being able to design a minigame for an in-game holiday festival. And so the minigame she ended up making, she describes as Guitar Hero, but a bell choir, which I'm going to go ahead and take her word for it. I've never played Guild Wars, but that does sound great. And so while she was making this game, she went through and started digging for music that she could use. And she kind of realized that none of the music that the previous composer for Guild Wars, Jeremy Soleil, none of it was really good for a holiday setting. It was great music, but none of it worked for the kind of attitude that she wanted. And so then she went back to the first Guild Wars to see what it had and what they did during holiday events. And they were just like takes on normal Christmas carols you'd hear every day. And she was like, that's kind of boring. And so she decided to just write her own music. She wanted to write carols that sounded like they would actually come from the world of Guild Wars. And the sound team at ArenaNet caught wind of this. And that word got to the composer at the time that was working on post-release stuff for Guild Wars, McLean Demer. I don't know how to pronounce their last name. But they had taken over for Soleil after Guild War II's release. And they heard some of Raine's songs and liked what they heard. And so Raine was like, so what if I recorded an orchestral arrangement of one of these songs? And Demer said, yeah, sure, why not? And she did. And that song ended up in a trailer for the game. And from there, Raine was a composer and a designer all in one, who was allowed to she would design enemy encounters or boss fights, and then she'd write her own music for those encounters and boss fights. Just this chance happening. And suddenly she's writing music for this game. And she would begin regularly doing so. In fact, there are still some songs in the game now that you can hear that Lena Raine wrote, apparently. And I can't find much past this story, but I'm so glad I at least found this story because it's such wild coincidence, and I cannot believe a company let her do that, and I'm so glad they did.
Absolutely. You go, girl. Make your own job.
It's so cool. It's such a cool story. So she's been working at game music ever since. Her inspirations within games include Yasunori Mitsuda, which that name might come up again later.
Very soon.
Yoko Shimomura, Shoji Meguro, and Keiichi Okabe, all three of whom we have already done episodes on.
Yeah.
And outside of games, she cites Janelle Monáe, Imogen Heap, and the Japanese pop group Wednesday Campanella, who has become popular in recent times. So, her discography is mostly games that I have not heard of, to be fair, outside of Celeste. But again, Guild Wars 2, she did music for Living World and Heart of Thorns, which I assume are expansions.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know anything about Guild Wars. A game called Music Madness, Dead State, Upshift, and Panic at Multiverse High, none of which I've ever heard of. And she's also done multiple original albums, such as a symphonic suite called Snowflight, an EP under the name Kurain called Singularity, an album called Chip Collection, which, while I have not heard it yet, I meant to listen to it before this episode, but I didn't get a chance, I would assume is a collection of chiptunes.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, in March of this year, she released her first full-length solo album called One Knowing. All one word. She is doing quite well for herself, especially after Celeste launched her into a spotlight, more so than I think she'd ever been in the past, which good for her.
Oh, yeah, and what a spotlight. I mean, to bring up the Game Awards again, for Lena Raine to be on stage with Lorne Balfe and Hans Zimmer and Sarah Schachner and like these classic great composers. Yeah, did I mention Hans Zimmer? Did I mention Hans Zimmer? Like to be like on stage with these contemporary and classic composers on video games' biggest stage of the year that Jeff Keighley wants to create. Just remarkable for her career and that big upswing.
Her Last FM page actually mentions her big year in 2018 was capped by being on stage with Hans Zimmer at the Game Awards.
I mean, yeah, holy cow.
Only one of the biggest composers in the world. It's fine. So, as for things about the actual game's soundtrack, I wasn't able to find a huge amount, but I did find a couple of fun things, including how the tone of the game sort of formed out of both Raine and Matt Makes Games working together and in tandem. Raine says that when she was first brought onto the project, they only had a demo of the first level, which just looked like a cute platformer to her. So she agreed to write some cute platformer music. But then later, the real emotional scope of the game started to sort of reveal itself. Once she saw the end of Chapter 2, which, if you've played the game, that is when she goes up to a payphone and has a phone call with somebody from her past that you don't really get the full story on, but you get enough. And then wakes up from this terrible dream and then calls her mom. She started to realize just what kind of game this would be. And she also thinks that through this, the team at Matt Makes Games also began to see what kind of game they were making. And it began this back and forth thing where Raine would sort of work to establish a tone, and then Matt Makes Games would work with that tone even more and polish it, and then Raine would work with that polished tone, and back and forth, and somehow that became the game that we know today. And it's such a cool sort of process too. I don't think we've ever talked about a game where the soundtrack sounds like it made the game what it was, while the game also made the soundtrack what it was, and it was no one person's work that did it.
Yeah, certainly not, all the back and forth collaboration inspiring each other. Yeah, it's more, tweak this, fix this in the score. I mean, yeah, that's awesome.
So let's jump into some critical tracks. The first one being, fittingly enough, First Steps. So this is the first level of the game, And to me, it sort of has this quiet, hopeful feel to it as you trek through an abandoned city, which is a weird time for that to sort of, show its face. But whatever. I think that it really sort of sets the tone for what the game is going to be in general. And it's also one of the first songs that people tend to connect to in the game. I mean, again, it's one of the first songs you hear in an actual level. And it also just happens to contain a couple of melodies that are going to come back into play later.
Yeah, this one, it has to be here. Like, this is the main, I would say it's like the Madeline leitmotif, and it's going to show up in other varieties, other forms. But yeah, this happy, cheerful tune that represents Madeline. And before things start to get really difficult. But like, it's the brightness of the chip tunes. It's the song that like really represents the game when people are like, oh, this is the soundtrack, without knowing anything on first blush. Like, this is what people point to for the Celeste soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. After that, we have a complete change in tone, because speaking of when things start to get difficult, our next song is Awake.
Oof. I mean, yeah, what a change in tone.
So this plays after you wake up from Madeline's dream in Chapter 2, after she has just been chased by Madeline for the first time, and she's feeling kind of defeated by this dream, and she's making her way to a payphone to go call her mom and tell her that things are getting more difficult. And it's just, again, you all know me by now. A good piano piece, I'm there for it. And this is a beautiful, simple piano piece that this is about the time when the player realizes, oh, there's more to this game.
Just so powerful. I mean, yeah, you go from the happy, bright tunes of this chiptune song with first steps, and then it's holy cow, like it just punches you in the gut. I mean, my goodness. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the piano song, they've got you, they got me, and hopefully they've got everybody.
It's just very memorable piece, very memorable moment of the game. And again, if what Raine is saying is accurate, which, I mean, I imagine it is. I don't see why she'd lie. I don't know why I said if she's accurate. She'd know. This is also around the time that the developers started to realize what kind of game that they were making.
Yeah, just a big shift in the process. Wow.
Our next song is Scattered and Lost. For some reason, this sequence always stuck with me a lot. And this song is a big part of it. But this is a sort of a dynamic building piece, because it takes place in Chapter 3 when you're in the hotel of Mr. Oshiro, who is a ghost that can't really let go of the fact that his hotel is abandoned and broken down, and all the staff is gone, and he's dead. And Madeline decides to take it upon herself, like, I'm going to help him clean up his hotel, and he seems like a nice person, and I'm going to help him out. And this backfires tremendously. And I think Oshiro is a fantastic character, because he's a great representation of how sometimes it can feel like you're helping somebody, but sometimes you really aren't. And that's not your fault. You can't read somebody's mind. You can't know that you're not helping. But also, it is an experience that you should really try and learn from for next time.
As far as music goes, like the percussion's wailing on it, I definitely got visual flashbacks to that chase, and a terrifying chase on its face. But then it's silly when you learn that you can like Mario jump on his head and just go plop, and he goes away for a little bit. But yeah, like that's one of the big sort of like stress points in that game so far. Like, yeah, being chased by Battlein is one thing, but Mr. Oshiro gets real big.
Mm-hmm. And it's also just, I'm also reminded of Theo popping out of the vent and being nah, man, we got to get out of here though. This whole place is a red flag and a half. We got to leave. Sometimes listen to your vent friend when they pop out of the vent. Sometimes they have wisdom. Not all the time, but sometimes. If I ever pop out of a vent, maybe don't listen to me. But if Peter ever pops out of a vent, it depends on the context on that case. But
yeah, it's still a toss-up, let's be real.
Our next piece is actually one of my favorite pieces in the entire game, Confronting Myself. The hunter becomes the hunted. So throughout the game, every time you see Battlein, you are being chased by her or chased by something that she is sending after you, but not this time. No. Now, you are chasing her. This is one of my favorite sequences in the entire game. This is the one that I replay the most often, I think. I went back and replayed it on the way to my brother-in-law's bachelor party. Just in the car. I replayed that whole section. And it's the chanting, I think. The chanting gives this song such a different feel from anything else. It also just ups the intensity so hard. And it really, really helps that environment as you're chasing Battlein. Near the end, she'll start shouting stuff at Madeline, like, I'm just trying to help you. You're not a mountain climber. Why won't you just realize that? And by this point in the game, you, the player, because you have made it so far, and also Madeline in story, have the confidence to shout back, no, you don't get to decide that. I can make it to the top of this mountain. I can make it to the end of this game. And I'm going to show you, even if I have to drag you kicking and screaming. It's just so cool.
Fantastic song. It's got that final boss feel to it, that intensity. And yeah, it absolutely fits with the story. Just a very empowering moment and a hype song to go along with it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, number 5, the most well-known song from the entire game, the most famous song, the most famous moment, I guess, the most famous sequence in all of Celeste. Reach for the Summit.
Had to be here. Gotta be here.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. This is the song. Like, it's a medley of themes from the entire game, all merged into one coherent piece, and I can't actually listen to this song without getting really emotional. And this is another one of those songs, like, just go listen to the whole thing, because it's, what, 11 minutes long?
Yes.
It's so long. And every bit of it is fantastic. It's the final sequence of the game. Well, the final official sequence of the game. There's a chapter after this that I've never played, but it exists, I suppose. Madeline has been chased down. She has been convinced that, all right, maybe it would be better for us to work together. Even if I am scared and I really still don't think this is a good idea, I'll listen to your side, I suppose. And Madeline and Madeline start working together. And they climb from the bottom of Mount Celeste to the summit in one sequence. And it's so good. Quote from Matt Thorson: "We wanted to communicate in that final chapter where you're climbing the mountain again that it's not just fixed. It's not just magically better. There's still conflict within her. But now she's working with that other part of her to at least examine that conflict and approach it together, even if they don't agree." Which in game is represented by now you have 2 air dashes.
How amazing is that? It feels so liberating. You feel so good. You're constrained the whole game by just one. Like, you gotta, I mean, yeah, there are certain things that will kind of refresh your air dash, but you only have that one. So you better make the right strategic moves. And now a world of possibility has been opened up.
And just the imagery of battling during the end of each sort of section where she isn't putting Madeline down anymore. In fact, she's throwing her up higher in the air. Like, how powerful is that imagery, though?
So good.
It's so good. And one thing I really like about this piece that I've only noticed after so many listens is that it's always climbing. And every once in a while it will drop, but then it climbs right back up. And it's a reflection of Madeline's story in the game. Like at the very beginning, you'll hear the piano with the da-da-da-da-dun, 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 da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then it goes right into the da-da-da-da-dun again. And it's so the whole song works like that. It's so cool.
What a fantastic track. Just, again, it's the perfect encapsulation of everything. The completion of the experience. And yeah, like you, I have not played Chapter 8. Like, this is the end of the game. Like, let's be honest, like, you do this, your credits roll, you did it.
I'll try Chapter 9, I guess, but I haven't touched Chapter 8. I didn't even realize Chapter 8 was in the game until somebody mentioned me, because this is such a perfect ending. This is the spot to end the game.
And credits roll and everything. Who could blame you?
Mm-hmm. So, tracks on the cutting room floor. Making this list was hard. Not as hard as some in the past, because there are obvious standouts. But this is a really good soundtrack. And we both have tracks on the cutting room floor. So lay yours on me.
Sure. I only have one, and it goes back to like nearly the beginning of the game. But this is Resurrections. Again, another long piece. I would say listen to the Reach for the Summit before you listen to Resurrections. But this is like the entire theme for Chapter 2, which is titled Old Sight. And yeah, this is where you discover that mirror. And Madeline breaks free. She breaks through the mirror. She becomes real. All those demons inside you have been made spirit, flesh, so to speak. But the game also adds these new dark space matter mechanics that you can dash through and then get shot through. It's also you being chased by Madeline for the first time, as you mentioned. It's just got this really dark and groovy vibe, and it's one that I know, especially when I was struggling through it, like this is like the first real challenge the game throws at you. And so when my skills weren't up to snuff, this is me dying a lot and getting used to this music and really enjoying it. But okay, keep pushing on. Like, this is your first real test.
And it's this is apparently one of the songs that Raine believes is the most dynamic piece in the game, and she believes it's one of the first spots where players really see an epic sort of, I don't want to say set piece, but that's the only word that's coming to mind. An epic sequence. That's the first time they get something like that.
Absolutely. Well put.
As for me, I have two more sort of relaxing and tranquil pieces for you. The first one being Madeline and Theo. This usually plays when, as the name would suggest, Madeline and Theo are interacting, usually next to a nice campfire. And whenever it happens, it's always a nice change of pace. Theo is a good dude, and he has an Instagram, I guess. Well, that's where they announced the Chapter 9 DLC. I didn't know it existed until that announcement. But he has one. He even... When Madeline was announced to be in Towerfall, which she's in Towerfall, the Switch version, he posted a picture of like Madeline's new hobby is really cool, and it's Madeline doing archery. Because that's what Towerfall is. It's an archery local multiplayer game.
But his big thing is, like Polaroids, and so like that totally makes sense why he'd have an Instagram.
Yeah. And just this theme is very nice. It's very calming. And again, it involves melodies, leitmotifs that will come back in stuff like Reach for the Summit.
Mm-hmm.
My other song is Exhale. Which, first of all, what a fantastic name for the credits song of this game.
Oh, yeah.
Just, you did it. It is a gorgeous piano piece, which again, made for me at that point. And I just find this song to be incredibly meaningful and gorgeous, and I just love it. So what will I never forget about the game? I don't really know how to put it into words. Mental health awareness and stuff like that is, especially in the past couple years, it's become a very important issue to me. I technically have a podcast, though I have not run it, or I have not like put out an episode in a while, called It's Different for Everyone, which I really need to bring back. I really feel like there's something there that could help people. And so this game, dealing with these issues in such a wonderful, meaningful way, it's important. I think this is one of the most important games I have played in years. It was absolutely, I'm pretty sure, close to, if not my game of the year in 2018. And I personally have also dealt with anxiety and depression a lot. I actually, at one point, went through a thing called ECT, which was an experimental depression treatment. And unfortunately, it did not help me, it did not help me completely, but that was mostly because of my actions. I didn't follow up. It was never meant to be a permanent solution. And I did not get medication to help it. Don't be like me, kids. If somebody tells you need medication, get it. This game's message of like, it's okay to accept help. It's okay to accept things about yourself that you don't like, because those are still part of you. You don't have to let them define you. But don't pretend that there's some outside entity. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not licensed to talk about a damn thing anywhere, on anything that I do. But I don't know. I think it's the message 100%, and how hard it struck a chord with me and with seemingly everybody else that played the game.
Well, thank you for talking about that. Like, I know it's not easy to do. It's not easy for anyone to talk about or even listen to, and it, strikes resonant chords within them. Like, I'm feeling it right now too. But I think, we were going to be talking about Celeste at some point. I think there's no getting around that. But I feel like when we're talking about it now, and when this episode comes out, for when you get to listen to it at home, at work, etc., I feel like it's a really fitting game to talk about right now, because in a time where mental health is unjustifiably under attack, in a time where video games are unjustifiably under attack, for things that should have pretty clear solutions that nobody wants to do anything about for a variety of corruption reasons, etc. But a time where people pick on mental health and video games as wide-casted scapegoats, as problems that need to be fixed. No, they're not. And it's, in a way, it's kind of brilliant for the best game example to put the two together to be brought up at this time. So thank you for talking about Celeste, because I think it's a game that more people should absolutely play. And granted, we've been talking about it a whole lot, but again, like we said, us talking about the game doesn't spoil the experience for you. Mm-hmm. It's powerful. It's important for you to go through, at the very least, if not for personal growth, then for empathy and what it feels like to walk in another person's shoes.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So whether it's Nathan Drake climbing cliff faces, showing real physical strength, because my God, those arms, like, how do you have that strength? But then also the emotional strength of Madeline to climb Mount Celeste. It has been a week all about climbing, and that will do it for this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at the Dobaga. The video version of the podcast, you can find that on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also over at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's really that audio MP3 podcast version that you want. That's over on Anonymous Dinosaur over at anondino.squarespace.com. Get it on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all those podcast storefronts around the world. Take it in your car, in your ears, at work. We won't tell your boss. You're just listening to a podcast full of conversations about video game music and the history. I mean, it's so good. We really love doing this every week for you, and hopefully you enjoy listening. Any updates for the Spotify playlist this week from these soundtracks?
Both of them. This is the first week in a very long time that both of these soundtracks are on Spotify.
Fantastic. So please find that update. We'll have an update for you, and just listen to all the songs that we've talked about. Absolutely. And then also we're on social media at Soundchat OST, so you can leave us feedback on these episodes. Give us suggestions for games that you'd like us to talk about. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I'm talking about Yasunori Mitsuda. See, I told you he was going to come back up.
There he is. He's right there. I'm talking about Jonathan Morale. It's going to be another great week on the show. I can't wait. Two fantastic games and great soundtracks to go along with it. But Joe, let's play us out.
So, as before, our transition and ender, we like to highlight a remix or a fan cover of a song from the soundtrack. I'm actually doing something a little bit different. While looking for my cover, I found a YouTuber named Lil Tommy J, who seems to do music and little like sound things using sound effects from the games. And he did one for Celeste called Mountain Climbing. So please enjoy that.
I know Lil Tommy J is doing a lot of Game Grump remixes back in the day, so it's really nice to hear this song. I think you'll definitely enjoy it for sure. Thanks so much for listening to this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.